Welcome, everybody, to the Cover 2 podcast. I am Nick Nenad.
I'm Jared Smith.
And today we have a great show for you, as always. A lot of NFL talk, maybe talk a little baseball, and then at the end of the show, a little college football preview. Guys, football is really back. College football starts in about 2 weeks. We're going to do a preview today because next week is our big NFL prediction show, so we won't have a lot of time on that show, so we're going to do it this week. Wrap up the top 25, see who we think is going to win, then maybe predict who's going to win the national championship, and be probably dead wrong about both our predictions.
Alabama.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Alabama. How do you say the Alabama quarterback's name? Let's just start practicing right now so we don't screw it up later in the show.
Tua is about all I know. I know his first name.
We know 3 letters of that guy's name, and that's it. So,
I'm not even going to try and butcher his last name.
So we're going to call... I think we did that last year, too, when we talked about national championship games. So, nonetheless, we're going to do that. It's going to be a good show. We want to start the show off today, though, with a subject that is very dear to Jared's heart. The NFL, was it the helmet rule? Is that what we're going to call it?
I believe that's what it's actually called. Is the helmet rule.
Yeah, that's a pretty stupid name for it. But nonetheless, we're going to talk about this because there's been some egregious calls during this preseason. This might be due to the fact that it is the preseason and that the games don't matter, and they're trying to, notify players that these aren't good hits. But, I mean, Jared, as you know, and you've been displaying on Twitter, some of these hits are just normal hits. I mean, some of this is a little bit ridiculous. So we're going to start the show with a little, talking a little crap on the helmet rule. So, Jared, I'll let you start because I know this more. You've been caring about this a lot this last week.
Right. And this is on so many levels for not only the NFL, but just football in general. Obviously, the NFL's main focus, and this has been for years, probably over a decade now, has been safety. And I am all for that. I am for keeping players safe while they're playing the game and after their football careers. Let's not forget that the average career life for a football player is 3 years. All right. So when you see Tom Brady playing for, 15, 16 years and all these, Larry Fitzgerald playing for 15, 16 years, that's fantastic. But that's not actual reality. So a lot of players, when they're done playing, whether it's the first year, third year, fifth year after they're retired, we'll come up with concussion syndromes and CTE and all this stuff, right? So the NFL has gotten a lot more involved and spent billions of dollars in research and trying to figure out how best to protect these players when on the field. Once again, I am 1,000% for that. But at the end of the day, this is a tackle contact, very physical game that these grown men are playing. And if you want to keep it a tackle sport, you have to let these players tackle.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's just one of those situations to where there's only, in my opinion, so many rules that can be put into place while still keeping the actual game of football. And if that confuses people, I'm very sorry. But I think basically what I'm trying to say is I think there are way too many rules in place right now, not only for the athletes actually playing football, but for the referees. Because the referees have to juggle so many different things at full speed, and then every once in a while they get to go back to the replay booth if a play is deemed replayable, right? But for the most part, referees are trying to juggle 1,000 different rules in their head. So if they think that they see something, they're more than likely going to call it. And that's not how it should be. They should be 1,000% sure, or pretty damn close to that, if they're going to throw the yellow flag to make a call. And so I think one of the things that they've been doing in the preseason is kind of over-exaggerating these calls, trying to really hammer in the point to these players that, hey, we are trying to take away the spearheading and using the helmet as a weapon. But when it comes to the regular season, if some of these calls that are being made in the preseason carry over, you're going to see a much slower game. Instead of games being 2.5, 3 hours, you're going to see games going into the 3.5, 4 hour mark. You're going to see more injuries, in my opinion, because the pace of play isn't going to be as good. So, players are going to be stopping. Players are going to get cold. They're not going to be able to stay as warm. And honestly, it's going to affect the outcomes of games. Therefore, it's going to affect people's jobs because people are going to lose their jobs over this fact. So I think it goes way more than just the safety aspect. This is actually talking about the game of football. if the NFL doesn't want players to use their helmets at all, then take their helmets away, take their shoulder pads away, and give them flags. And let's just play flag football. Because seriously, like, at the end of the day, it is called tackle football. And you have to be able to tackle.
Yeah.
You're either going to tackle someone as a defender and prevent them from scoring a touchdown, or you're going to let them score a touchdown, then you're going to lose your job and be out of football. So you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't for these players. I'm kind of at a loss.
Yeah, you make a lot of good points there. And the losing the job part is obviously nobody wants to do that. And the NFL, obviously, we don't want to get to flags. Because if we get to flags, Nick Nenad isn't going to be watching the NFL anymore. The National Flag League, that's what it would be called, I guess. But, yeah, no, I really hope that this is just a preseason thing, that they're just over-exaggerating these calls, like you said, in the preseason, to kind of notify the players, hey, we're going to start calling this more and more. We won't call it this drastic, but we're just letting you know. Get your heads up and, play the game better. Obviously, this rule came from the CTE stuff, the Ryan Shazier injury last year, and overall the NFL being afraid of liability. I honestly think that is the big reason this rule came about. And so the NFL, which we've talked about a lot on this show, is very irrational sometimes in its higher up administration. We see the suspensions don't make sense, the biasness between players, they're committing domestic violence compared to smoking a joint before a game. And now this tackling rule. Also, you could put in the touchdown rules. The Jesse James tight end for the Steelers last year. Was that a touchdown? It obviously goes all the way back to Mr. Des Bryant, as you well know, Jared. That play really started all that. So the NFL is not very good with its rules. It's very controversial, and the fans don't like it, and it kind of ruins some games sometimes. I think you're right. These games, they scaled it back last season. They made it less commercials because people were complaining. I mean, it was essentially every kickoff and every punt there was a commercial. So it was getting ridiculous. And then they scaled back that, and the games were shorter, and the games were more enjoyable. I did enjoy watching the games more last season because there wasn't as many commercials, and you could watch one or two drives and not have to worry about, we're going to go to a 3.5-minute commercial after this one play, So now they're instituting this rule, and like you said, these games are going to go back to being as long as they already were because there's so many penalties being called. People don't want to see penalties. I guarantee 95% of football fans don't care if a guy uses his head on a tackle. I'm sorry, but that's the game they signed up for. What are they going to outlaw a punch to the face in UFC next? They're not going to allow guys to hit each other. It just doesn't make any sense, and it's a sport where hitting is part of it, and they're trying to take hitting out of the game. Hitting is part of tackling, and in order to take a guy down that is 235 pounds and 6'3", like a Julio Jones, you're going to need to hit the hell out of that guy. And sometimes your head gets involved, and sometimes Julio Jones will lower his head to avoid a tackle. It's going to happen. I get it if a guy uses his head and blindsides some guy. I'm okay with that. We see these shots to the head. The game between the Steelers and Bengals, although entertaining, was a little over the top last season when guys were hitting each other in the head. So that's okay. I'm okay with that, and that rule really hasn't changed the way football is. But this rule, it's getting a little ridiculous, and I really hope this is just a preseason thing.
Yeah, I hope so as well. And I think Richard Sherman, who was on Twitter, actually retweeted what he sent out a few days ago. I think he kind of said it best. He basically said, when an offensive player is running at a defender, and an offensive player lowers their body and therefore lowers their head, as a defender, when someone is coming towards you, it is literally human instinct for you to lower your body and at the same time lower your own head to, one, protect yourself, and two, try to make a tackle against that offensive player. So it's not to say that that defender is purposely trying to use their head to make the tackle, but you can't lower your body without lowering your head.
It's impossible.
Right? Your head is attached to your body last time I checked.
Physically impossible.
Right. So even if you are trying to use your shoulder, whether your left or your right shoulder, the helmet is more than likely going to make contact with the offensive player's helmet or another part of the offensive player's body. So therefore, the helmet in most situations is almost always going to be involved. If the NFL referees really wanted to, they could call this helmet rule foul on every single play. Think about offensive and defensive linemen. What do? Every single snap.
Yeah.
They are literally 300-pound men on both sides of the ball who are within inches of each other at the snap of the football, and they engage with themselves with not only their hands and shoulder pads, but also with their helmets. So technically, the NFL could call that on every single play.
Yeah.
But guess what? They don't, because they're offensive linemen.
Well, no, exactly. And that's the problem with the rule is there are players that are affected by this rule and there are players that are not. And like you said, the linemen aren't, unless it's egregious or a defensive lineman is tackling somebody or maybe an offensive lineman hits someone straight in the head. But then again, that kind of goes back to normal rules, so it doesn't even matter. It's the problem with, and this is what I was talking about with the NFL, their rules don't make sense a lot. And there's so much gray area in a lot of these rules. It's hard for fans to know. When you're watching a game, or let's say you're watching a movie, you tend to kind of know what's going on. You know that something doesn't make a lot of sense when you're watching, okay? Or you know, oh, that makes sense. That's understandable. I'm watching it. With football, it seems like that a lot of stuff isn't making sense anymore. And this happens a little bit in the NBA because they've really gone with their rules a lot, and the hand checks and stuff like that. There are a lot of fouls that don't happen. The much publicized game with LeBron James last year, where was that a charge? Was it not? You know what I'm saying? So like, this happens in other sports too, but with the NFL, man, there really is a lot of gray area. And it's just essentially the referee's discretion, and if he turned his head a certain way on a play and saw something. I mean, it's really just a random, like you mentioned. I was watching the Cardinals preseason game against the who were they playing?
Chargers.
We could say Chargers. It will work out that way too. But so when they were playing the Chargers, you're right. Like, there were some hits that they called, and there were some hits that the NFL replayed in that Cardinals game specifically that was saying, what the hell is this? This is really being called? And there was plays that were worse than that weren't called earlier in the game. And then I was like, ooh, might be head, but nothing. And then these dumb plays are called. It's just, and what else is funny about this, too, is it's not being called when the starters are in, too. It seems like this is being called when the players that are fighting for a roster spot aren't famous, nobody really knows. That's when these plays are being called. So it is like, that's why I really do have hope that when the stars come back into play, they're not going to be calling this on David Johnson or Le'Veon Bell. They're not going to be calling this on the Honey Badger or, Khalil Mack, if Khalil Mack ever comes back to the Raiders. They're not going to be calling it on those guys. They're calling it now on the preseason on the guys that don't matter. And I don't mean to disrespect these players, but a lot of these guys aren't going to make the roster. And so that I do hope that it is just a preseason thing. But man, they gotta get the gray area as some of these rules, because it's making the NFL not as fun to watch. So you don't really know what's happening. There could be a play down the field where you don't know if it's pass interference or not, and then the referee calls it, and you look at the replay, and nothing happened, and you're like, wow, that just ruined our entire season potentially, right? This could do it too. There could be a tackle at the goal line that is called for a helmet-to-helmet hit, or whatever this rule is supposed to mean, and it could ruin a team's season. And that's what you don't want. You want plays and touchdowns and players to be the reason seasons end and games are decided. You do not want the referees or the higher up in administration in the NFL, making the rules and making games change.
Right. My first instinct when I initially heard about this rule, and then throughout the first 2 weeks of the preseason have seen this rule, was to just start to blame the referees. And in some instincts, yes, it is their fault because they are the ones that are literally making the calls. But I think we have to take a step back and we have to look at the referee committee and Roger Goodell and whoever else is in charge of actually putting these rules in place, whether that's the NFL owners or whoever it may be. These are the people that need to actually sit down in a room and come up with a different type of solution.
Yes.
Because unfortunately, and this is just my own opinion, I'm not 100% sure about this, but I'm almost certain the majority of the people that are making these rules have not played professional football, and more than likely have not even played college football, right?
Yep.
So for people who do not have experience in playing the sport, how are they able to make these decisions when whether it be about the helmet rule or pass interference or whatever the case may be? If it is a football related rule, I don't understand how bigwig businessmen are able to make these decisions when they have not played the sport themselves. That to me is kind of one of the most baffling things. And so, like you mentioned and like I have earlier, the referees have so much that they have to sit and dissect on every single play that unfortunately I feel that sometimes they get a little overwhelmed. And when you know things are going 100 miles an hour and they think that they see something, they basically have to call it because they're trying to cover their own butts. Because if they don't call it, then after the game they're going to, their film is going to get critiqued, and then they will get docked, and then eventually they won't be refereeing games anymore, right? So they're kind of under the microscope as well, just as players are. And so I think when you take a step back, these referees are almost in the same boat as the players. It's just they're trying to, it's like, oh, wait, do I make that call? Do I not make that call? Well, if I just throw the flag, then maybe I'll just kind of, protect myself from the NFL.
Yeah.
So there's so many dynamics and little intricacies that are going into this. It's not just about the helmet rule. This is about players and coaches' jobs. This is about the referees as well. And this is about the head of the NFL coming together and saying, listen, we need to critique this. We are here for safety. We don't want players using the helmets as a weapon. But at the end of the day, they wear a helmet and shoulder pads for a reason. And like I said, it is physically impossible almost to tackle someone when a person is coming at you and not use your head in some type of way.
Yeah.
Because if you don't use your head, if you think you're just going to use your shoulder or your arm or something, then you are really going to more than likely injure yourself.
Yeah.
Because you're keeping your head completely up and trying to use one part of your body when someone else is coming at you 100 miles an hour. It just doesn't make any sense at all.
And you could make, like I was thinking about this a second ago, you could make the case, rugby they don't use pads. Okay, well, the difference with those guys is they're all like 240 pounds. Okay, so they can all take a hit. A lot of these DBs are 185 pounds, 200 pounds max, right? A lot of these wide receivers, some of them 175 pounds. I mean, it's some of these guys aren't built to just take every hit and be able to tackle in any way possible. Sometimes they have to use their shoulders, and sometimes your head accidentally connects with some guy. Like, the rule is over the top. It's for litigation purposes, not 100%, but that's one of the main reasons. Because the NFL doesn't want to get sued because they understand there's a CTE problem right now, and it's ruining the game a little bit. And I think it's the one rule in sports that has literally gone almost too far. Like I said, you mentioned basketball. Well, there's the handshake rule, but it really hasn't ruined the game, right? The game's still fun to watch. We'll watch Warriors in the finals, stuff like that. Baseball, the collision rule at home plate. That was disappointing, but it really hasn't ruined the game. There's less contact at home plate, but there still is very fun plays to watch in baseball and stuff like that. And hockey, they eliminated hits to the head. Obviously, that needed to happen. Yes, there's not as big hits, and there's not these giant, jarring, collisions, but the game is still fun to watch. Football, though, the game is going to start to not be fun to watch if they continually call this rule. So, something's going to need to change. Like I've mentioned a couple times, I'm going to keep stressing this. Hopefully, NFL, this is a preseason thing, and it is not going to go over the regular season, because I don't want to watch the Cardinals when they play the Redskins in week 1 and have the game marred, or potentially have my favorite team, the Cardinals, lose because of one of these dumb rules. And I'm sure you don't want the Cowboys, they play the Panthers week 1,
right,
losing to the Panthers week 1 because of one of these dumb calls. So let's just hope it changes, Jared, because I know we're both on this. We see these hits and we're just like, this is ridiculous. This isn't even football anymore.
No, not at all. And I mean, the fact that we've spent almost 20 minutes
seriously.
Talking about this
19.
shows kind of how relevant it is to the game and how much it really can affect the game. The last thing that I kind of want to say on this point before we move on is I've kind of been thinking about, okay, how can this rule be tweaked? How can this rule be changed? Or how can this rule be kind of taken away completely so that the actual game of football, does not get ruined? And the only thing that I can think of is that the entire Players Association needs to come together with the NFL. They need to sit down and literally agree on a contract that says when NFL players retire, or even when they are playing, they will be handed all the information that they need to know about CTE, any other potential injuries or things that can affect them either during or after their playing careers. And once that has been established, I think the players need to sign off that they will not sue the NFL, or that there needs to be some type of discrepancy.
That is true.
Something there that says, okay, if the NFL does their due diligence, does their job as far as giving the players all the information and all the avenues and help that the players need, then I think the players also need to understand that this is something that they are signing up for. These are grown men that are doing this. No one is forcing them to do this. They could go out and get a normal 9-to-5 job, right? They won't be making as much money, but they are choosing to play this sport, right? So if you are choosing to do this, you should also understand the consequences that could potentially come with this, right?
Oh,
so
absolutely, yeah.
If you are okay with that, and you understand what could potentially come with this, it's just like with someone who smokes. I don't mean to be throwing people who smoke out there, but if you're a smoker, you have to know the risks that are involved with that.
Yeah,
okay?
You can't blame it.
So if you get lung cancer or if you die of smoking, something like that, I mean, at the end of the day, you have to know what the consequences are.
Yeah.
And I don't, unfortunately, I say the word dying, but I don't take that lightly. But there have been cases of players who have died because of CTE.
Yeah.
So this is a much bigger deal than actual football. But going back to the actual players, if they understand that, then they should not sit here and be suing the NFL. So I think both sides need to come to an agreement on this, and there needs to be a reworked rule. That's the only way that I can see something changing, because as of right now, the players are stuck in their ways as far as we don't feel the NFL is helping us enough, and we will sue if we have to. And the NFL is sitting here saying we are going to continue to make these rules as necessary. So there's somewhat of a standoff.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And it is a little bit blasphemous for an NFL player to go play football and know the risk and complain about the head helmet rule, the helmet rule, and then go out and sue the NFL because they didn't protect him enough. No, bro, you just don't know how you don't know how to tackle. You're slamming your head into. So I agree with that. That's a very good point. I think it'd be very difficult to get that done though, because I still think players would be hesitant to sign away, potentially their life and not be able to get anything in return. But I think now people are really realizing that when you sign up to play football, there are going to be things that happen to you later in life. My brother, for example, plays high school football right now. At a very high-level high school where some of these teams he plays are essentially college football teams or lower-level college football teams. So he's going to get he's going to get the crap knocked out of him on some of these plays. He understands, I love football, I want to play, I don't care about the risks a little later in life because I love this sport and I want to make a lot of money. So, I have that personal connection to it. So, we'll see what happens in the future, but, something does need to happen because you don't want the game to be ruined because two sides can agree on something that is, essentially kind of an easy thing to agree on.
Right, right. And I want to make myself very, very clear.
Yes.
I'm not saying that these players shouldn't be out there looking for help. There's NFL doctors and NFL trainers. There's team doctors and team trainers, right? Plus, I'm sure players have their own personal doctors and physicians and all that. And plus, a lot of these players make a lot of money, right? So I'm not saying that these players shouldn't be out looking for help. What I'm saying is they should be smart enough to understand that they cannot solely rely on the NFL to help them.
Yeah.
They need to save their own money, use their own money and resources, whether it's the team or their own personal doctors, to go and get help. And if players are sitting here and thinking that the NFL is just going to sit here and take care of them, they are completely wrong. Because at the end of the day, I don't care what the NFL says, they're about one thing, and that is the bottom line. They're about their money, and that is it. And like you mentioned earlier in the show, and you hit the nail on the head, the only reason the NFL is so invested in this is because they have been sued before and they don't want to lose any more money. If the NFL was not losing money over this, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about this, and the NFL would not care.
Yeah, we've seen it in the other high-context sports, too. UFC has kind of micromanaged their stars. They don't let them, this is not as big of a deal, but they don't let them do their own advertisements anymore because they want more money. And I think this issue will happen in those kind of sports, too, boxing and the UFC later when we realize that, these head injuries are going to affect these guys, because, these guys are getting slammed in the head for sport. That's literally the point, is to knock a guy out. Occasionally you see the submission or whatever, but it's like, the point of UFC or boxing is to hit the guy as hard as you can in the head so he goes unconscious. That's not the point of football, but it's pretty damn close to that in some ways, where you have to knock a guy down and you have to hit him hard enough to where he doesn't stay up and score a touchdown against you. People lose their jobs, like you mentioned. We need to go to break. It's 10:30 here, live on the show. When we come back, we're going to be going into more NFL talk, more of the preseason talk. We're going to let the helmet rule go away for now. So a little more NFL talk on the other side of this break. This is a Cover 2 podcast on OC Rock Radio.
Jackson, 3rd and 2 to the end zone, and it is caught. That was Chris Moore with a 7-yard touchdown from Lamar Jackson.
On 3rd and goal from the 14. Darnold stepping up. He can run. He does, and he throws to the corner of the end zone. This time it's a touchdown by Charles Johnson. No pass interference. And the first touchdown for Sam Darnold.
Join him with 4 minutes to go in the first half. Allen steps up, feeling the heat, throws, caught, touchdown! Wow. What a throw! Rod Streeter brings it in.
It's official. Adrian Peterson will play next season in our nation's capital. He'll face off against his former team, the Arizona Cardinals, in Week 1.
Welcome back to the show. Second segment here going on. We are going to continue some NFL talk with a little bit of Week 2 preseason notes.
Yes.
A big signing for one NFC East team. Another rookie quarterback could potentially be taking the reins as the starter for an AFC East team. And a look at some of the games overall, but I do want to start with probably the biggest news as far as a signing goes for the week, and it's one that will hurt my Cowboys, potentially in a sense.
Potentially hurt my Cardinals too, because they play in Week 1,
The Washington Redskins, after losing their first-round pick Darius Geis to a torn ACL, are signing Adrian Peterson, AP, to a 1-year deal. So we'll see. It's just, I saw him practicing yesterday, and they had some video, and it's weird to see him in a Redskins uniform. He's wearing 26.
It was very weird to see him wear a Cardinals jersey too last year. That was very strange.
Yeah, I'm still used to him in a Vikings jersey, but nonetheless, he is a Washington Redskin. Nick, what are your thoughts?
You know what? This is a very interesting signing. Obviously, he was only signed because Geis was injured, and they have an injury, I believe, to Samaje Perine too. Not serious, but serious enough to where they might have to have Robert Kelly be their starter for Week 1. And you don't necessarily want to have Robert Kelly be your starter for Week 1. No disrespect, but Robert Kelly isn't the number 1 running back, especially for a team that's trying to make the playoffs and has a quarterback like Alex Smith. So, it's a very interesting signing. He was probably the best running back on the free agent market. And so it makes sense that you'd sign a guy like that. But I don't know. I almost wish we were playing Do You Care right now, because I don't really care that he got signed by the Redskins. And I think you'd probably care more because he is in the NFC East now, and I maybe should care for Week 1, but he didn't really make a difference on the Cardinals last year. He made a difference in one game. And it seemed like that one game he kind of just surprised the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I was actually at that game live. And it just seemed like he just surprised everybody and still had it or whatever. And so, I don't know. The rest of the season, the Cardinals didn't have that good of an offensive line, and he ended up, barely rushing for 100 yards per game. And it really took them to really give him the ball like 25, 30 times to even have him get those 100 yards. So, he's just, he's past his prime. And I think he will help. I don't think he'll be the clear starter. I think he will split carries with whoever's healthy for the Redskins, and he'll get 15 to 20 carries max, I think. But, we'll see. I think he needs a good offensive line to be a good running back nowadays.
Which they don't necessarily have.
It reminds me a lot of the Cardinals. Now, I'm just not that excited because, AP's just past his prime. I always used to say that the 4 or 5 running backs in the league were, the top running backs were David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell, Ezekiel Elliott. You could throw Todd Gurley in there now, and then there was Adrian Peterson. And that's just not true anymore. You could maybe throw like Christian McCaffrey in there, or maybe Saquon Barkley or someone somewhere now. But AP is just not, and that's the reason why it took him until Week 2, Week 3 of the preseason to get signed. I just don't care about this signing. And after watching him every single game last season for the Cardinals and really not make a difference, I don't really see it as a big difference for the Redskins. I see it more as damage control than an actual potential star in the making.
Yeah, no, Father Time has caught up a little bit with AP. I mean, obviously he still looks
he's still
like
a great running back.
And he can still play the game, right? So it's not like they're signing him.
Yeah, he's just not going to make a difference.
Just for name purposes. Yeah. The guy can still play. Is he the Adrian Peterson of old when he was in Minnesota? No, and he's not even close. And like you mentioned, being a Cardinals fan, being able to watch him basically every week last year, you can see that he just doesn't have that same burst or some of the same attributes that he used to. For the Redskins, though, who were in dire need because they not only lost Geis, they also lost their second or third running
P.
back.
Ryan's injured. I don't think he's out. He's not out for the season like Geis is, but he's injured enough to where they have to worry about it week 1. And as a Cardinals fan, I am enjoying the hell out of this because the Redskins, they're not a bad team. It's still a solid matchup, and for the Cardinals, who we really don't know what the hell is going to happen with them this season, to have a running back situation like this where they essentially have to play AP, and we watched this like AP, that's not that big of a deal. So, you're right. They're in definitely damage control, and they got to figure something out quick.
Yeah, they do. So, this isn't a huge signing. It's just because it's Adrian Peterson, we have to talk about it, and it's been the biggest signing so far this week. There also was another significant signing that was a little under the radar, whether it was because of this Adrian Peterson signing or not. George Iloka, the strong safety from the Cincinnati Bengals, was released, I believe, on Monday. And it was a very surprising release. He'd been a five-year starter for the Bengals. The Bengals drafted
good defense, too.
Right, Jesse Bates out of Wake Forest, a safety in the second round. And they, I guess, want to give him a try. And so George Iloka, who was going to account for about $5.5 million on the Bengals salary cap, was expendable. And instead of trying to trade him and get something back, they just flat out released him, which is a little surprising for a 27, 28-year-old safety in the prime of his career.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right, yeah. Typically at this time of the year, you don't see these type of releases. If this were to happen, you would think it would have happened before training camp even started. But because the caliber of his status, he was quickly picked up, and he just signed a deal today with the Minnesota Vikings, who, last year had the number 1 defense
Come
overall.
on, guys,
so
what are we doing?
now you pair him with Harrison Smith, who is one of the top safeties in the league as well.
Man.
So another underrated signing by the Minnesota Vikings, but I just wanted to throw that one out there because that one can definitely make a difference for that team.
Oh, I mean, that's the one team I don't want him to sign with.
Right.
My God.
Yeah, I wanted the Cowboys to sign him because Cowboys just got 2 safeties injured in their game against the Bengals last week, but they weren't as quick to the trigger as the Minnesota Vikings were. So, definitely good for
What was
Vikings.
how much money did he get for this signing?
I'm not exactly, the monetary value wasn't released.
Okay.
I know he had 2 years left on his deal with Cincinnati, and so they're going to have to pay him some type of value. So I think the signing with Minnesota wasn't necessarily about the money because he knows he's still getting money from the Bengals. It was really just more about finding a home, knowing that he can be a starter in the league. So, I'm sure he'll get a couple million, but, to balance that and to get that with the money from Cincinnati, he's going to be having
the Vikings are starting to look like the Eagles last year with some of they signed defenders and they have so much depth now. To get George Iloka like that off the market just randomly during the week, during week 2 of the preseason is outstanding for them. And like you mentioned, I heard the Cowboys were involved. I didn't really hear a lot of other teams. But so good for the Vikings. I mean, and good for George Iloka to quickly sign and not make this a big deal.
And the thing is, he's a starter in this league, right? So it's not like, okay, he's 34, 35. We're not sure if he has anything left in the tank. The dude's 28 and he can still play. I mean, it's not surprising at all that he was going to get picked up. I wanted the Cowboys to pick him up yesterday. That's how good of a player I think he is. So, good for the Vikings. Let's switch switch positions and go from the safety position to the quarterback position. I know Nick really wanted to talk about this. We had an injury scare last week with the Buffalo Bills' A.J. McCarron.
Another former Bengal.
Yeah. It looked like he had fractured his collarbone in that week 2 preseason game. And then he had a lot of testing done, a couple MRIs, and it revealed that he just had like a strained shoulder. So the Buffalo Bills actually get off very, very lucky with that. But still, they're not exactly sure when McCarron is going to come back. that leaves a potential starting spot open, and for one Josh Allen to basically take the reins there. So, Nick, I just want to get your thoughts on the injury and if you think this is Josh Allen's job to lose.
It's a mess in Buffalo with this quarterback situation, because when Josh Allen was drafted to that team, and like we talked about, I think we probably talked about it on draft day, and we probably talked about it last week, everyone kind of just thought, okay, he's going to be the starter since Tyrod Taylor was gone. And so, but for some reason this whole preseason, they've been kind of leading him on slow, not just giving him the reins. They started A.J. McCarron. They were playing Nathan Peterman above him. They were giving Allen third-team reps. Slowly but surely, even without these injuries, he was moving up to the first team. He will play with the starters. He will play with the starters, obviously, this week because McCarron was hurt, and that was just a given. But so now it's looking like Josh Allen's going to start, like Jared mentioned. And this is just interesting because the Buffalo Bills aren't a very good team. And like we mentioned last week, this might stunt the growth of him, because not that A.J. McCarron and Nathan Peterman were established stars like a Tyrod Taylor would have been for them and established quarterbacks, but they still can play and they still can teach Allen something. And it would have been nice if he could have stayed, on the bench for at least most of the season or whatever, because I don't believe the Buffalo Bills are going to make the playoffs, and I don't believe a lot of people think the Buffalo Bills are going to make the playoffs. So Allen, with limited offensive, prospects and a limited offensive line, it's going to be interesting to watch. And for a guy that has him on his fantasy team, it is very interesting to watch. Not that I'm going to start him. I have one of those leagues that's a franchise league, so you want to draft younger guys. And that's not important at all. I'm just mentioning that is one of the reasons I'm interested in this topic. But I just don't know. I'm afraid for Josh Allen that this might hurt him, because he's going to get sacked and he's going to throw interceptions because guys won't do their right routes, and LaShawn McCoy is not in his prime anymore. So it's just, I'm a little bit afraid. Jared, what do you think about Josh Allen probably starting week 1?
Josh Allen is no doubt the most talented quarterback that the Buffalo Bills have. Nathan Peterman and A.J. McCarron, in my opinion, are good to adequate backups.
Probably backup. Yeah, exactly.
They're backup quarterbacks in the National Football League. Josh Allen has the most talent. Now, it's his job to excel, learn the playbook at a quick pace, and basically learn under fire, right? And I think that's what the Bills are going to do. Even though they sit in the division with the New England Patriots, there's only one way to find out if this kid has it or not. We know that he has the arm strength, but does he have the mental makeup and just the quarterback awareness to be able to go in and lead a team like that? You've got LaShawn McCoy. You've got Charles Clay at tight end. You have the tall 6'5", 6'6" Kelvin Benjamin at receiver, right? So you do have some weapons. You have a decent offensive line, and your defense is, led by Sean McDermott, the head coach, who's a defensive guy, right?
Yeah.
So not that they have all the talent in the world, but I think they have enough talent to where Josh Allen should be able to make some plays. And I feel he's going to get that opportunity, not necessarily because he's just won the job, but because he's just the best quarterback that they have.
Yeah.
And because he was the number 1 overall draft pick, he gets a little more leeway as opposed to if he was a 4th or a 5th round draft pick and he would maybe need to earn his playing time a little bit more. So I think this one is kind of a start by default for the Bills.
Agree.
And I think they're going to have some growing pains and some learning curves. I don't really see them winning the division at all. And I think that's somewhat of a good thing for Josh Allen because the expectations won't be as high, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Say the Bills had this fantastic super team, and Josh Allen, the rookie, had to come in and basically lead this team. I think those expectations might be a little too much. But the fact that this team is mediocre at best and isn't expected to really do much and make the playoffs, I think that's good for him, right? He can just go in. It's okay if he makes some mistakes, and year 2, year 3. Then it's when you should really start to see them evolving.
Yeah, you can start kind of comparing it to situations. I mean, it would be like if Tyrod Taylor got hurt for the Browns or Sam Bradford got hurt for the Cardinals. It would be starting by default. I mean, you can attest to this. I believe Tyrod Taylor is going to be the starter for the Browns week 1.
He
correct?
will.
And Sam Bradford will be the starter for the Cardinals week 1.
He will.
Unless there's an injury. So both of those guys, Rosen and Mayfield, would start by default as well. Sam Darnold, different situation. I think he's just going to start. I think he should start, and I think if the Jets don't start him, they're just making another bad quarterback decision. So, but you're right, Josh Allen does have the best situation here, because you're right, nobody really expected, once they lost Taylor and lost a lot of the other guys, really expected them to make the playoffs. And they are in the AFC East, so they're not going to probably win that division. The Miami Dolphins look like they're going to compete a little more, and then the Jets with Sam Darnold, we really don't know. So they're probably not going to make the playoffs. The AFC is solid too, and so you're right. He has the best situation, and hopefully he does well. I don't like to see rookie quarterbacks not do well, especially if they get a chance to start. It was disappointing to see Nathan Peterman throw like 5 or 6 interceptions in that game. That sucked. You know, you have your first start, and you start in this giant stadium, you know, where the Chargers play in StubHub. And you have this, that was a joke, by the way, play in the smallest stadium in the league. But so you go in and you can't even get past a half, and Tyrod Taylor has to come back in. So you don't like to see that kind of stuff. You don't like to see the Jamarcus Russells and people like that just totally fail. So I'm excited to see what Josh Allen can do, but I'm a little bit afraid that it might stun his growth, and I don't want to see him get hurt or turn into like an Andrew Luck, who just keeps getting sacked. You know, so it'll be interesting to watch. I'm not a Buffalo Bills fan in any case, but you know, you like to root on those kind of teams that have a fun fan base like the Bills
Right.
have.
And speaking of another rookie quarterback in that same AFC East division, Sam Darnold seems to kind of be taking the reins a little bit over in New York. Obviously with Josh McCown and Teddy Bridgewater, who are both playing good, but you pretty much know what you're going to get out of both of those guys. I want to get your opinion really quick. Does Sam Darnold start week 1?
He has to. If they don't, like I just mentioned, it's a bad decision by the Jets. You have your guy, Sam Darnold. I think we both mentioned this, and a lot of other people mentioned this, was the most NFL ready. He might not be the best quarterback in the long run. You might see a Josh Allen or a Josh Rosen end up being the best quarterback in the long run, or potentially Baker Mayfield. But Sam Darnold right now is a solid NFL quarterback. I don't see him being a failure as an NFL quarterback because he's just that good. He has the tools. I don't see him being maybe a Tom Brady or an Aaron Rodgers or something like that, but he'll be a solid, consistent quarterback for you every single year. Something the Jets haven't had for the longest time. I mean, even like I mentioned last week when Mark Sanchez was there, that was more their defense carrying Mark Sanchez. That was a Brock Osweiler or a Joe Flacco situation where those quarterbacks were kind of overrated in the sense when they won the Super Bowl. Or Peyton Manning that last season, they were a little bit overrated because the defense was so good. I think that's the situation that Mark Sanchez was in. That's not the situation Sam Darnold's in. He's in a situation where that roster just stinks. Okay, they have no offensive tools. Can you name the running backs for the New York Jets? Just off the top of your head real quick.
Bilal Powell, Isaiah Crowell.
Okay, so not stars. Can you name a receiver for that? Robbie Anderson, maybe?
Robbie Anderson.
And most people who are listening to the show are going to be like, who the hell is that?
Yeah.
So that's who Sam Darnold...
Quincy Enunwa.
Okay, yeah, another guy that's, you know...
Yeah, so no one that's lighting up.
Yeah, there's no Brandon Marshall this year to help.
No.
But, so Sam Darnold, you just need to start him, okay? What is Josh McCown really going to do for you, or Teddy Bridgewater? You need to start Sam Darnold. He's not disappointing. I can understand if he went out there and disappointed, right? So, you know, you need to start him. He needs to start week 1. Let's hope the Jets do it, and let's hope they can start this new era in Jets football. And I hope Todd Bowles, being a former Cardinals defensive coordinator, I like the guy. I thought he was going to be a good coach. They kind of screwed him with the roster. I know he'll make that right decision. It just depends on if the GM wants to make the decision. But yes, I believe he will start week 1. Yes.
Right. Last rookie quarterback that I want to get your thoughts on really quick, Lamar Jackson. And he's had, you know, up and down kind of preseason so far. Not as many downs as some people might have thought. Yeah. We all know that he can definitely run. He can show his elusiveness. We haven't seen a guy like that come into the NFL since Michael Vick. Joe Flacco has surprisingly had a good preseason camp as well. Does Joe Flacco have what it takes to keep that starting job, or does John Harbaugh and that coaching staff switch to the elusive Lamar Jackson?
No, I think, and I actually am pretty high about this Ravens team this year. Not going to say they're going to win the Super Bowl or anything, but I think they have a legitimate chance at the playoffs. And I think it would really take for Joe Flacco to have a bad season and show that he doesn't have it anymore for Lamar Jackson or Robert Griffin III to start for this team. I think Lamar Jackson is when they drafted him with, I believe it was the 30th overall pick or somewhere around that range.
Yeah, it was the last pick, 32nd.
32nd,
last pick
right,
in the
exactly.
first round.
So when he was drafted with that pick, I think it was known that this was a project. And although Lamar Jackson has played solid, excuse me for the voice crack there, solid in the preseason, Joe Flacco is an NFL quarterback. He's like a Tyrod Taylor, for example, a guy that has played. He's literally won a Super Bowl, whether you want to blame that or you want to give that to the defense or not. He has won a Super Bowl. So you're not just going to throw that away because you think some running quarterback is going to change it. Now, the Baltimore Ravens have had a history of having backup running quarterbacks. They had Tyrod Taylor when they won the Super Bowl. They did pick up Robert Griffin III. And they also have drafted Lamar Jackson. So I think that's what they want to do eventually, but they're going to let Joe Flacco defeat himself before any other quarterback comes in. Because Joe Flacco, like I mentioned, he's won the Super Bowl. So you're not going to throw that guy under the bus until he really fails and really has a bad year. So no, I don't believe anybody else will start besides Joe Flacco until he really does something bad, which I don't think was going to happen this year.
Yeah, no, it's Joe Flacco's job to lose. I think Lamar Jackson needs to get a little better with reading defenses and making a little bit better precision passes. But one thing we do know, he can definitely use his legs. The last portion of this segment, I just want to quickly kind of go over. Week 3 of the preseason is what they call kind of the dress rehearsal games, to where, depending on injuries and all that, a lot of the starters you will actually see play, most of, if not all of the first half of these week 3 preseason games. This is really the time where it's not about the guys trying to make the team. It's like, okay, we want to get our starters in the game. We want to get them conditioned, ready, see if they can go out and execute. And it's not about calling extravagant, crazy plays. It's just about, all right, let's see if our starters and our new guys can go out and do it, right? So, for Tom Brady, can his new receivers, can his new linemen, can they all gel well and mesh together? For the Cowboys, they have a lot of rookies that are probably going to be playing prominent roles for them. Can those guys step up and do what it takes to play against another team's best unit?
Yes.
So this is really the week, if you wanted to watch preseason football, to watch it. I know for the Cowboys, they have already come out because of injuries that they've had already. Dak Prescott, Ezekiel Elliott aren't going to play.
Of course.
So some of their starters won't, but around the league, the majority of the starters will be playing a lot more football this week.
Yeah, makes sense. And funny enough, the Cardinals and Cowboys will play on Sunday Night Football, so we will both be watching that game intently, and both will see how the teams do. Obviously, without Dak and Ezekiel Elliott, the team completely changes on offense. So the Cowboys, maybe to watch the defense, I think, to see how they can play against David Johnson, people like that. That should be interesting to watch. But you're right. If you are a fan of football and you're kind of like, I don't know about the first couple games. Well, these games are kind of the ones that in a way count. Week 4 is the worst. So this is the last really time if you want to watch football before the NFL season starts on the 9th or whatever that Thursday game is. This is the game to watch, and then you can kind of watch college football instead of the NFL, probably the week 4 of the preseason. But it'll be fun. I'm excited about that. Obviously, playing the Cowboys is always fun because we can kind of jar back and forth. We're not going to make a bet like we did last year or anything because this games just don't matter.
It's only preseason.
Exactly. But real quick, so we're kind of done with the NFL talk, and we're mentioning a rivalry between me and you, our teams. So on the 9th, if you guys haven't heard, or the week before the 9th, we're going to have a special guest come in. And Jared, you said something to him off the mic. He said something to you last time on my other podcast. So I want you to give some words for the RKJ man, Ryan Johnson, who's going to be in studio, and he's ready, and he's going to come after you, and he's going to talk a lot of crap against the Panther. He's a big Panthers fan. So I want to give you some words. What do you want to say? Well, give me a sound bite for the RKJ man I can play for him.
Yeah, good luck. That's all I got to say. Listen, he hasn't come in here and sat in the room with us before.
He doesn't understand what's coming.
So I'm very, very confident in my abilities and my knowledge. Listen, if the Panthers win, then I'm going to give him all the credit that they deserve. I'm not really sure. We'll get to that when it comes. But him and I haven't really sat down and talked football yet, right? We've kind of gone back and forth on Twitter a little bit and that type of thing. But no, listen, the door's always open. We don't lock these doors.
No, we don't lock
right?
the door.
I'll share a mic with him, right? I'll sit right next to him. Whatever he wants to do, we'll sit here and we'll chop it up a little bit.
Yeah, no. So, but he's some things he said about you and the Cowboys has not been the funnest thing.
That's
so.
okay. Hey, listen, I can take a hit. As a Cowboys fan, you either love them or you hate them.
Yes.
There is no in between. That's not the first time that someone has criticized me for being a Cowboys fan. I will stand proudly saying I'm a Cowboys fan, and I don't back down from any of that.
Jared has taken the more polite route at the trash talk. Any words about the Panthers, really quick?
No, listen, I got Cam Newton on my fantasy team, so I want Cam Newton
exactly.
to do well. Okay, they have a really good team. They're loaded on defense. They've got some good weapons on offense. It's really about Cam Newton being consistent. That team will go as far as Cam Newton wants to take them. So if he can become more of a consistent passer, I'm not saying he's going to be a Tom Brady or an Aaron Rodgers. We all know that he's a big 6'6" quarterback. He can use his legs. But if he can use his arm a little bit better and be a little more accurate, I think this Panthers team can really push for that division lead and take that division. So if Cam Newton does well during the season, the Panthers are more than likely in the playoffs. If Cam Newton has a mediocre to a bad season, they're more than likely not, and I think it's that simple.
Sounds like a typical Panthers season, right?
There you go.
And by the way, we'll have more of that next week. Like I mentioned, NFL predictions podcast, one of our favorite to do every single season. We're going to be doing that next week live on the air at 10 o'clock as usual. And we'll talk more about the Panthers and the Cowboys and the Cardinals and all that stuff. But for now, we're going to be moving on to Do You Care? And then a little bit later, college football season predictions. So a little bit, the NFL's pretty much done for this podcast. It's going to be big next week. So we're going to go to break. This is the Cover 2 podcast on OC Rock Radio.
And he lifts it in the air. Left center. Taylor back. Gone! Jed Jerko. 4-3 Cardinals. Jerko a solo home run off of Jensen here in the ninth.
I mean, everything is a cutter. This one high doesn't cut, but it cuts over the wall. And look at Jerko.
The shift is on for Carpenter. The pitch. Matt swings and he hits it high. Left center field to the track, to the wall. It's a gunner! Back to back for Jerko and Carpenter. Home run number 34 for Matt. And the Cardinals lead 5-3 in Los Angeles.
We are back here on the Cover 2 podcast. Once again, I'm Nick Neenan.
I'm Jared Smith.
And Jared, like I ask every single week, do you know what time it is right now?
What time is it, Nick?
It's time for Do You Care? Care.
Nice effects today.
Yes,
That's
it was
good.
good.
I like
it was less loud and obnoxious as it was last week, right? With the water bottle and stuff like that.
A little much.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, a little much, but sometimes you gotta go over the top to entertain the people. So, it's time for Do You Care? If you don't know how to play the game, I'll explain it. Well, you don't play the game. Jared and I play the game. So, if you thought you were playing the game, you're not. But we ask each other whether we care about a certain topic, and we tell you if we care or not, and kind of explain the topic a little bit if you don't know it. So, per usual rules, Jared gets the first question today, and the first question is, Jared, do you care that LeBron, KD, and Kawhi Leonard were all practicing at UCLA this week?
No, I don't care. I mean, I think it's pretty cool. I'm sure all those guys are friends. That would have been a hell of a pickup game to get in on, right? Yeah. But no, LeBron has a house out here. Kawhi is from LA. KD, plays for Golden State, which is Northern California, so it's not far for him. So it makes a lot of sense why they would all get together and practice and play. But I think people are kind of reading a little too much into this as far as, are they all going to join each other next year and all this stuff? Listen, I'm not saying that there's not rivalries and guys don't dislike each other, but these guys have nothing against each other, and they're probably just, practicing and kind of getting up and down and wanting to hang out. So good for them. It's creating some type of buzz. I think the most realistic situation for Kawhi Leonard for next season is that he could become a Laker after next offseason. But as of right now, I think it's nothing more than some friends trying to get together and play a little pickup ball. Nick, do you care? Speaking of the NBA, or basketball, I'm sorry. Rumors are swirling that Kobe Bryant might play in the Big Three.
Yes, I do care, because although there have been more rumors saying he is not, the fact that the rumor even came out probably means there was some discussions. And I didn't see this happening because Kobe really has it seemed to mean that he's retired. If he really wasn't, he probably would have came back and played within a year back in the NBA. I think he ended his career in the right way. He didn't, he ended with a 60-point game. He's also done a lot of stuff outside of basketball that he succeeded in. The much publicized deal where he, with the Body Armor sports drink, I believe he made $198 million off his original investment. So good for him on that one. He has a venture capitalist firm that's backed by some pretty popular or pretty famous people, some pretty important people. That's worth $100 million. And he also, of course, won an Oscar last season. So he doesn't need to play in the Big Three. But I do care because the fact the rumor came out means that there was some discussions and this might actually happen. You know, we heard the rumors about LeBron. I didn't really think it was going to happen coming to the Lakers. But it ended up coming true, so I'll believe anything. But it would be really, really cool to see Kobe Bryant play again, and would probably absolutely boost the ratings for the Big Three, because I think it is, at least in my case, has lost a little bit of its appeal from its original season. I didn't really watch it last season, but I haven't watched a single game this year, because it's just, it's a bunch of old guys that can't play anymore playing. I don't really need to watch that. I'll go watch, guys play at the pickup place at I don't know, the gym down the street. So if I want to see that. So if you get Kobe Bryant in there, though, that's good publicity. And obviously Ice Cube being the leader of that and being a Laker fan and being friends with Kobe Bryant, it could possibly happen. But these are just rumors. We're not saying it's going to happen. Just rumors. Jared, do you care that Des Bryant did not sign with the Cleveland Browns?
I do care. And Des Bryant, since being released by the Cowboys, has really only had maybe a handful of teams that the average fan knows to be interested in him. It was reported a few weeks after Dez's release by the Cowboys that the Baltimore Ravens had offered Dez a 3-year deal. Now, I'm not sure how much money was involved. And Dez immediately turned it down for whatever the case may be. He said, I don't think it's the right fit for me. No, thank you. I will wait for other offers. Well, guess what? That was back in April.
Yeah.
And we are now in the middle of August, and there have been, not much since then. The Cleveland Browns, of course, who are on Hard Knocks, have gotten a lot of, publicity, and there have been a lot of rumors that they've been linked to Des Bryant. One, because Des, still has a little bit left in the tank, and two, because Josh Gordon, maybe they're not sure if he's actually going to be able to play a full 16 games. Well, Josh Gordon this past week came back to the team. We're not sure when he's going to be ready to play and get himself in shape, but he's back in the facilities and, back in meetings and working out with the team. Dez went and had an interview with the Browns and left without a contract. So I don't know if, the Browns didn't like what they saw from Dez, or maybe they said, hey, Dez, right now isn't a good time, but if we get an injury or maybe a couple games into the season, keep yourself ready.
The cool thing is we're actually going to see it happen.
Right,
too,
right.
On Hard
It
Knocks.
was,
I
it
believe
was
it
on
hasn't.
Hard Knocks.
It
did air. It aired last night.
Okay, so
yeah.
I'll
I did not
back.
see it,
I
but it did air. It was on the episode of Hard Knocks, which aired on Tuesday night, last night. I don't think it's the best situation for Dez, because I don't think the Browns are necessarily contenders, even though I think they will have a better season than they've had in recent years. I think Dez needs to go to a team with an elite quarterback, a guy that can, really throw a ball to Dez in a certain spot and make him look better. Not to say that Tyrod Taylor can't do that, but I would like to see Dez go to the Saints with Drew Brees, or if he were to go to the Packers with Aaron Rodgers. I think an elite quarterback would help Dez, and kind of get him a little more targets and make him look like the number one receiver that he used to be. Nick, do you care that Kenley Jansen blew his first save since coming back from the deal?
Yes, I do care. As you guys probably know, I am a Dodger fan. And I believe on last podcast, we almost spent most of a segment talking about the Dodgers' bullpen woes. Well, Kenley Jansen was out with the heart issue. We talked about that. He came back. He's okay. And I pretty much said, hey, when Kenley Jansen comes back, whenever he does, things will improve. Well, they didn't. And Kenley Jansen not only he didn't blow the save. The game was tied. But not only did he blow the game, he gave up 2 home runs in a row, not even one. to Jed Jorko, the Cardinals, and then Matt Carpenter, who's an MVP candidate. But he said he came out. He says his cutter, his famous cutter, was not moving, so it was essentially he was throwing 90-mile-an-hour fastballs down the middle that weren't moving, and that's why these guys can hit home runs. That is the one facet of Kenley Jansen's game that makes him kind of mortal in some ways, is when that cutter isn't working, he's essentially throwing fastballs down the middle. So hopefully it improves. Hopefully this is just a one-time thing. He hasn't been able to make a save since. But the Dodgers really, really need him because they are losing games in the ninth inning. They're not losing games in the 7th or 8th or the 6th or in the beginning of the game. They are losing close games in the 9th every single game. And it sucks as a Dodgers fan to be watching this because these all could have been wins. And they just need to figure out the bullpen woes. And obviously Kenley Jansen coming back hasn't helped. And the Dodgers are going to have trouble making the playoffs if this continues because they can't close out games. Jared, last question. Do you care that the Washington Nationals are starting to sell some of their best players?
I do care. And the reason why I do care is because upper management for the Nationals about 20 days ago around the trade deadline decided not to trade Bryce Harper and other players that were going to make a difference for this team. At the time, they were sitting about 5.5 games back.
Yeah, they had a chance. And we were talking about they had a chance.
They were hovering at about 500, but they still had a pretty good chance, right? So, obviously, knowing that they weren't going to get top dollar for Bryce Harper, you might as well keep the guy and see if you can make the playoffs with him. 20 days later, sitting just a game below 500 and 7.5 games out, they kind of flipped the script and, in most people's opinion, have raised the white flag. They ended up trading away Daniel Murphy to the Chicago Cubs and first baseman Matt Adams to the St. Louis Cardinals, two pretty vital pieces to this team. Yep. They've still got Ryan Zimmerman, they've still got Gio Gonzalez, and of course they still have Bryce Harper along with some of their pitching aces. But it just seems like, even though they're technically, they're not mathematically eliminated, they're basically giving up. Yeah. So it I don't know. Do you look back and say, should they have traded these guys earlier and gotten more? Because now they're basically like waiver claims. So I don't think they're really getting much.
Matt Adams, I think they got just money for him. And Daniel Murphy, who hasn't played well this season, and they lost out on the value of him for sure. I think they traded him for one prospect and it wasn't like a top prospect. And Daniel Murphy isn't the youngest player ever. But still, yeah, you're right. They didn't get much.
No, not at all. So, if you're a Washington Nationals fan, this is kind of like, should we have traded these guys earlier and gotten something in return? But then again, at the same time, you can't fault the team for attempting to make a final-ditch, last-effort run at the playoffs. So,
of course.
Unfortunate for them, and like Nick said, they are more than likely done. We will see what happens with Bryce Harper and the rest of their stars going forward, because I could not very easily, but I think it's a realistic chance that Bryce Harper leaves Washington when his contract is up.
Yeah, interesting fact, too. Bryce Harper was actually claimed by one team, and the Nationals had to either trade him or take him off waivers. I forget how that works. So they took him off waivers, and that one team was the Dodgers, of course. But the Dodgers came out and said it was essentially a block so that he wouldn't be able to be traded to any other team or get signed by any other teams. I think they want him in the offseason, or at least they're going to try to make a run. So that was interesting too. So that was a big deal yesterday too, is not only were Daniel Murphy and Matt Adams signed, but Bryce Harper was claimed in the morning. And it was like, what the hell's going on?
That's interesting.
So, so Nationals are going to have to make a decision. They're really going to have to put everything on the table for Bryce Harper, but it's not looking nice.
Do you think they should have done this, though? Because, listen, even though they're 7.5 games out, and I know we're kind of pushing this segment a little more than a long
it's fine. No, it's absolutely.
But it's like the season doesn't end until September 30th, and we're sitting here August 22nd, right? Yeah. So we've got a little over a month. I mean, it doesn't look good, but they could still make a run. I mean, do you think this was smart of them to do?
It's very interesting because I don't know. I mean, Matt Adams was he wasn't even supposed to start this year, so I think they got a little lucky. They have Ryan Zimmerman to play first base, so that wasn't as surprising, and that's more of just letting a guy go do what he wants to do. The Murphy one was interesting because although he hadn't had a good season, if they were to say trade him in the offseason, I think they could have got more value for him. So that was more questionable. I think this is more telling their fans or telling the rest of the league that, hey, and by the way, because of that claim thing, Bryce Harper actually can't get traded anymore. So that was, like I mentioned, the Dodgers kind of made him not get traded by claiming him. So I think they're just kind of saying, hey, let's see what we can do. We're going to trade it, maybe give their younger players a better chance, maybe give a guy like Juan Soto more time to play and the other younger players. But yeah, it's very interesting. I don't necessarily know that if they should have done this, especially with Danny Murphy. Matt Adams was different. But yeah, Nationals just, it sucks. They still have the pitching. They still have Max Scherzer, Strasburg, Gio Gonzalez, Tanner Roark, like you mentioned. So they still have that. And if they were to make a run, they still would have a dominant pitching staff in the playoffs. But the hitting has definitely not been as good. And Harper still hasn't ever returned to the MVP form that we know him. But yeah, very interesting in the Nationals. It's tough for their fans because it's looking like it's not going to be good in the future for them. That is the end of Do You Care? Coming up next, we're going to do college football predictions. We're going to get that top 25 out, kind of talk about the Power 5 conferences, who we think is going to be well, who to look for in the Heisman Trophy. Yeah, that's coming up next on the Cover 2 podcast and OC Rock Radio.
The AP College Football Preseason Top 25 has been released, and no surprise, Alabama, the top-ranked team in the country, third straight year they've been ranked number one. The only other team that says they could do that, Oklahoma, back in the mid-'80s. Clemson comes in number 2, Georgia third, Wisconsin the first Big Ten team ranked. They are ahead of Ohio State, which checks in at number 5. Washington then checks in for the Pac-12 at 6th. Oklahoma, Miami, Auburn, and Penn State round out the top 10.
We are back here on the Cover 2 podcast, final segment of the day. And this is going to be a fun segment, Jared, because it is college football predictions. Obviously, the college football season, I believe, starts around September 1st. Most of the games are on that date. And like I mentioned, we were doing our NFL prediction podcast next week, so we don't have time to fit in a college football prediction, so we're going to do it right now. We're going to do it for about 20 minutes. So Jared, what do you want to start with? We want to go over the top 25, see who is kind of looking up and who possibly are the top teams. I mean, we obviously know you got the Clemsons, you got the Alabamas, you got the Ohio States, always up there. But there are some surprise teams up in the top 10. So pick maybe a team or a couple teams that we want to talk about first and really examine how their season is going to be.
Yeah, I'm going to look at Wisconsin at number 4. Mm-hmm. Miami at number 8.
Yes.
Those two teams, Wisconsin, to me in the last couple of years, has been one of those teams that I think, they've gone undefeated and they've had really good years.
Yes.
How much of that is talent-based and how much of that is a crappy schedule?
It's a crappy schedule.
Okay.
So I was waiting for you to say it, but
because listen, in the AP
they play
poll,
in the weak part of the Big Ten.
Yeah, in the AP poll, they're ranked number 4. In the coaches poll, they're ranked 7th. So obviously that's not a huge difference, but I think the coaches also understand, they're not top 5.
Can you look up their schedule real quick? Let's just look at it right now and see if they did it again.
Yeah, which
they just seem to miss Ohio State every year.
All right, so
conveniently,
first 3 games we've got. They have 3 straight home games, by the way.
Of course,
Western Kentucky. Okay. University of New Mexico.
Oh, there you go.
And BYU.
Okay, yeah.
And then their first real test, in my opinion, is the Week 4 matchup at Iowa. Iowa at home is always tough.
Yeah.
So I think that's their first. And then they get Nebraska. Then they go to Michigan.
Okay, so tough.
So, and then they play at Penn State, towards the end of the season.
But did they conveniently miss Ohio State once again?
Oh, they missed Ohio State.
Yeah, there it is. Now, Ohio State, obviously, a lot of problems this year. Off the field, so we'll see how well they do. But Wisconsin, so that's not too hard to schedule. But see, the problem is, and people have been saying this, and Nick Saban has said this, when your non-conference schedule is that terrible, because BYU's not a very good team, that's probably the best team in there that they're going to play. Sorry, you're going to miss out. I don't know why they're number 4. Why are they projecting them at number 4? When I swear to God, we have this conversation every single year, and somehow Wisconsin's going to be up there. But man, you're not going to make the Final Four. I'm sorry if you can't. They're going to have to go undefeated again. I mean, probably, right? Unless the year is weird and there's a lot of one-loss teams and stuff like that. But they're going to need to probably go undefeated. They're going to need to beat Michigan and Penn State and Iowa. You know?
No, they're not probably. They have to
Yeah,
go
they have to,
undefeated
obviously,
because you don't go undefeated with that schedule. Only, in my opinion, really playing 3 tough opponents.
Really like 2.
Yeah, if you lose 1 or potentially 2 games, you're done. You're out. Now, if you schedule a harder games right throughout the season, then I think that gives you, or at least in the committee's eyes, that gives them a little more leeway to either lose a game. Or lose a close game.
Well, I think also
not get blown out.
last season too, they did schedule LSU week 1. They played at Lambeau Field. LSU ended up being a giant disappointment, so they did get screwed a little bit there. But why not do that again this year? Why not schedule, let's say, Miami, right? Some random team from another division, or why not schedule TCU or Notre Dame or Stanford, someone like that? Come on, It's going to be hard. They're at number 4, but I think you're right. I think they're probably not really number 4, and we'll see when the obviously college football playoff rankings come out if they are undefeated and how high they are. But the college football playoff has been kind of generous to them too, so that would be interesting. Right. But for them to be the highest Big Ten school in the rankings is it's interesting.
With Ohio State and Michigan there, that's a little
very
much.
Interesting.
Yeah, my other kind of surprise team that was in the top 10 is the Miami Hurricanes. And I think Miami is a very, very young squad, a team that doesn't necessarily get looked at as much in the ACC. You've got Clemson up there, Florida State was up there, and then they kind of dipped a little bit. So Miami's a little bit of a surprise, but I think with Coach Rick, I think they can really do some good things. The one only problem that I have with them, and it's almost like the same thing with Wisconsin, is their schedule. Now they do open up against LSU. Right, and
LSU's ranked 25, though.
They are ranked 25, but it still is LSU. It's not like they're playing a Division II team.
Yes.
So I'm going to give them the benefit of it out there. It's at a neutral site. I don't know if they're playing in Dallas at AT&T Stadium, but they're playing at a neutral site, right? So that I'll give them that one. Week 2, they play Savannah State. Who the heck is Savannah State?
That's D2. That might be D3.
Who the heck is Savannah State? Then they play Toledo. Then they play Florida International, Coach Lane Kiffin.
No, that's Florida Atlantic, so that's not the right team. Florida Atlantic is that's Kiffin's team. Florida International is a terrible team.
I'm sorry. That's even worse. I was trying to give them a little bit of help. No,
yeah, exactly,
The Miami Hurricanes, as of right now, at the beginning of the year, only have 3 ranked opponents, just like Wisconsin. The opener against LSU, and then towards the end of the season, they have Virginia Tech. Actually, that's toward the end of the year. Oh, no, they have Florida State in the middle of the season. Obviously, that's a
and then potentially, if they were to get through, they would probably play Clemson.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So another team.
That's exactly like Wisconsin, though.
That I'm a little surprised they're in the top 10. Not necessarily because of talent, but more because of scheduling. And I feel that the scheduling needs to be a little bit tougher in order to garner those top 10.
Yeah, Miami's going to be one of those teams where they're probably going to be good this year, and they're going to be worthy, but it's like, let them play into the ranking. Don't rank them high so that when they go undefeated, they go, well, they were ranked at... No, I've actually been an advocate in some ways for there not to be rankings at the beginning of the season. I know that's not going to happen because they need TV ratings, but there really is no reason to rank some of these teams in any way because... it creates an unfair advantage for teams that don't deserve it, and there's been teams that have got murdered in the top, in that Final Four because they didn't really deserve it and they were in there, or they get killed in their conference championship game against a real opponent. So that's very interesting. I only really have one team I have a problem with in the top 10, and it's Oklahoma, because Oklahoma loses Baker Mayfield. So I believe they have the kid that was drafted in the MLB draft. Was it Kyler Murray?
Yes, Kyle Murray.
So this guy is not, number one, he's playing for 1 year, and then he's going to the MLB. He's going to go play for the Oakland Athletics, I believe. And so I don't know, it's unknown how good they're going to be at quarterback. So I don't know why they're at number 7. Their conference schedule will probably be difficult enough, so I don't think that's a problem with them. But why are they ranked so high? I could see them being ranked in the top 25, absolutely, but why number 7? Why ahead of a Penn State or a Miami or an Auburn? Why ahead of them? So I think some of these other teams like a Notre Dame or Stanford could be higher up on these rankings instead of a team like Oklahoma. So that was my own problem. You don't know what they have on offense. They don't have Samaje Perine anymore at running back. They don't have Baker Mayfield. So what are we seeing that is making them... And they lost their tight end last year too. So I don't know what we're seeing to make them number 7. That's my only grab. But what I do love is the top 3 teams. And that's Alabama, Clemson, and Georgia. And to watch these teams throughout the season, is going to be fun because I think these are the top 3 teams. And I think these teams have a really, really good chance at being in the top 4 at the end of the season. So I believe these 3 teams are good ranking. Everybody else after that is kind of like, okay, we're going to see. So it should be an interesting season. But what are your thoughts on the top 3?
I can't argue with the top 3.
Yeah.
Alabama has to be up there. They won another national championship, right? Nick Saban got another contract extension. You have to put them up there. Clemson, number 2. They bring their quarterback Bryant back for his 2nd season, still replacing Deshaun Watson, but did some really, really good things last year and almost won the championship again, right? And then Georgia at number 3, who played Alabama for the national championship.
Got and lost in overtime.
Right. And Jake Fromm is Georgia's
Jake
quarterback.
Fromm, we finally got his name
coming
right.
back.
Yeah.
So I have no arguments there with the top 3. I think those are the 3 best teams in college football right now. And if all 3 of those teams stay healthy, I feel that they should be in the college football championship again.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, who knows? I'm sure there will be an upset or 2, and pairing with injuries, you can't ever predict that. But with health, being good, I think these 3 teams are destined to go back to the Final Four.
At worst, 1 loss for any of these teams. At worst, and like you're mentioning, maybe an upset or something like that. But yeah, these are the teams where the schedule doesn't really matter as much because we know they just kick ass during the season. Alabama and Clemson specifically, it's like they always show up to play in the Final Four. Georgia, we'll see. They were a good team last year. They have a great defense. They have a returning quarterback. They obviously lose Nick Chubb and Sony Michel, so that will be interesting to see. But you can kind of replace running backs pretty easily in college football and generally in football. So that is very interesting. Jared, give me a team that either is not ranked at all or is ranked a little lower that you believe has a chance to be near that Final Four at the end of the season.
I'm going to go with Penn State. Mm-hmm. And they're ranked 10th, right? So it's not like they're at the bottom of the pack or anything. And they do lose Saquon Barkley. So I think that's probably the biggest reason why they're not.
It's probably the biggest loss in college football, maybe besides Baker Mayfield.
I would agree. I think one of the most underrated, not only quarterbacks, but players in college football is their quarterback, Trace McSorley. Now, he's not the purest passer back there, and he's not going to drop back and throw it 40 or 50 times.
And it definitely helps that Saquon Barkley was on the team.
Right. But what I think he does bring to the table is a good consistency of running and passing. And he doesn't look like it, but he can run with the best of them for a quarterback. He uses his legs very, very well. They like to get him out in bootlegs and open situations where he has the option to either throw or pass. And I think he has a very good chance of being on the Heisman candidacy this year. So I'm going to say that Penn State is my underrated team for the year. I think by the end of the year, they could be in the top 5, definitely within the top 10. I'm trying to look up their schedule right here. Let me see if I can get to it in a minute. But for right now, Penn State is kind of my underdog team. Now, once again, they start the season against Appalachian State. That's a little weak. Week 2, they go to Pitt. Not bad. Week 3, they're home against Kent.
Ooh, Kent State.
So, Appalachian State and Kent State, that kind of brings their ratings
They do
down
have a
little
good...
bit.
but if you look at their conference schedule, they do have a good conference schedule.
Right.
So
Ohio
I think
State, Michigan State,
Michigan.
Indiana, when they play at home, they're almost like Iowa. They're really tough to beat,
Underrated. Yeah, they're getting better and better.
They play Iowa, Michigan. They got Wisconsin and then Maryland at the end
That's
of the year.
what I'm talking about. They don't need to.
This schedule is a little harder.
And then possibly a conference championship game if they were.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm going to give this team the benefit of the doubt with those first 2 games of the year and say if they can get through this rough schedule, that I feel they should definitely be in the top 5.
And if they win a lot of those games, if they say lose one game and that one loss is to Ohio State or Wisconsin, they could still get in the Final Four, absolutely. So when you have a schedule like that, that's what could vault you in. Wisconsin should have to earn their way in, and so that I think giving them the number 4 ranking, like we talked about earlier, is helping them out, and that's not fair to other teams. All right, so my surprise team is going to be West Virginia. There's been a lot of hype around this team, and you're probably wondering why they're number 17. They have a lot of returning starters and stuff like that, and they do play in the Big 12, so it helps their schedule out. But watch out for them. I actually have another team I want to talk about too, because West Virginia I don't know a lot about, but I know they've had a lot of a lot of talk about them, and a lot of times these teams with a lot of talk about them, they come out of nowhere. They do end up being pretty good. So I will look into that a little more and do a little more research on that. But I do know one team that I believe is a lot like Penn State. They're ranked in that same area. Stanford. Stanford has a great quarterback running back tandem in KJ Costello and Bryce Love. Now KJ Costello is the local kid. He went to the same high school my brother goes to currently. And so we've been following him for a long time. But he's a good quarterback. And with Bryce Love, who's the best running back in college football this year, that's a good tandem. We know they like to run the ball. We know their system. We know it's ground and pound. They like to have a fullback, right? And we know their defense is always good every single year. So Stanford is another one of my surprise teams to get up there in the rankings. If you look at their schedule, I know they play... They play a lot of the top Pac-12 opponents, including Washington, who's ranked number 6. So the schedule is on par there, and I believe they will have a chance to possibly finally get that national championship game. They had Christian McCaffrey the last couple of years. They lost him, but Bryce Love is just there. Hopefully he doesn't get injured like he was a little bit last year. And so I'm going for them. I know they play a couple ranked opponents. Jared, why don't you just list off their schedule really quick?
Yeah, so they start off against San Diego State.
Not a bad team. San Diego State,
no.
Not a bad team.
Right, Rashad Penny came out of San Diego State.
Exactly, yeah.
So, they bring out some talent there. Week 2, right against USC.
USC.
Right, so they get that game at home, but that's always a fun matchup when they compare up against USC. Oregon's a ranked team, number 24. They go to Notre Dame.
Yes,
that'll be
Notre
a good
Dame, number
one.
12.
Right. Let's see who else. Like you mentioned, they play number 6 Washington. That's always going to be a tough matchup for them. And then they finish off the year, even though maybe necessarily not the hardest of opponents. Their last 2 games are on the road. At Cal, that's a rivalry game, and at UCLA.
And we don't know what's going to happen with UCLA this year, but Chip Kelly is their coach. Yeah, so they could be good.
This is a pretty tough schedule. But you know what? The thing that I like about Stanford is they don't shy away from what they do. Like you mentioned, they're ground and pound. They're not going to sit here and spread you out with 5-6 receivers and throw the ball 60 times a game like a Washington State and Mike Leach. That's the last time I'm going to say Washington State and Mike Leach ever. But whether they're up by 20 or down by 20, they're still going to consistently run the ball, and they're going to use Bryce Love. We're going to talk a little more, or at least I'm going to talk a little bit more about Bryce Love a little bit later on, and I love that you mentioned him because I think he is the best running back in college football this year now that Saquon Barkley is gone. Mm-hmm. So they're going to lean on him. They're going to lean on the kid from Santa Margarita, like you mentioned. And, I think that's a good pick for a surprise team this year.
Yeah, so anything else? What do you want to kind of see from this season, Jared? What are you looking for as far as, is this going to be a different season than the last couple, or do you see this kind of being similar and a lot of the same teams getting in the Final Four?
I'm looking to see a shakeup in the top 10, and more specifically the top 5, I guess. And obviously, like we mentioned, and like I said, if healthy throughout the whole year, Alabama, Clemson, Georgia should be in there, right? Yeah. There should be basically only one more slot in that Final Four championship round, playoff round. I want to see one of those teams get upset. Right, I think the Alabama days, or the Alabama team, their days are kind of getting numbered, just like with the Patriots and all these other, the Golden State Warriors in basketball. It's kind of like, all right, these guys have won so much that I'm getting tired of seeing them. I have a ton of respect for the way that Coach Nick Saban has built this program and the fact that they continue to get 5-star recruits and they continue to win. But I want to see an underdog team, whether it's from the SEC or another conference, come in and beat this team and get them out of the conference play. Or out of the,
let's say this. I don't want to see, I agree with you, I don't want to see Ohio State as that 4th team. And that has nothing to do with the Urban Meyer controversy. I just don't want to see that. I want to see like Washington get in, right? Or an Auburn.
Penn State.
Penn State. Like I mentioned, we could see Stanford get in there too. Or so I have to agree with you on that. I think it'd be nice if there was a different team and there wasn't 3 SEC teams or 2 ACC teams and 2, you know what I'm saying? So it'll be interesting to watch, but I have to agree with you on that. I want to see one of those teams get upset, and I believe it probably will happen too. Alabama, though, interesting. By the way, real quick, I have to, last season, I can't shy away from this. If you remember, I said that Nick Saban last year was not only going to not win the national championship, but was going to end up retiring at the end of the year. Not only was I wrong, he got an extension, and they won the national championship. So, I think
that shows that you will never bet against them again.
No, exactly. Yes. So I'm not going to say that this year, Just like we always said, Jaguars aren't going to make the playoffs, and we'll probably say it again, and then they'll make the playoffs, and they almost went to the Super Bowl. So I will never say that again, and I apologize to Nick Saban and any Alabama fans listening. I was 110% wrong last season.
I'm looking at Alabama's schedule really quick, and I didn't mean to cut you off.
No problem. No, I was done anyways.
Alabama, I don't know who Nick Saban talked to in the scheduling game, but they have their first 2 games at home against Louisville and Arkansas State.
Louisville's not that
whatever. Louisville's not horrible,
Arkansas
right?
State sucks.
First 2 games at home, okay? They have their last 3 games at home as well. Now, it's against Mississippi State, who always plays Alabama
they're ranked.
hard.
Yeah, they're ranked.
Okay. Citadel, which, okay, that's a garbage game. Forget it. And then Auburn at home. The fact that they get to begin the season with 2 home games and end the season with 3 home games, I think is kind of interesting.
Well,
it's like
the problem is all those D2 games are going to be home. And you know what I'm saying?
Right.
You're not going to Arkansas State.
I understand that, but when you get Louisville, Mississippi State, and Auburn at home, that's pretty. And you get Texas A&M at home.
Well, the thing about the Auburn and the Texas A&M, though, that just switches every year. So you just get lucky.
Okay,
and So, but I agree with you. What they have to do, and what they usually do, is they beat the crap out of all those teams. So then they go, okay, well, you could have an easier schedule than some of it. Well, we beat everybody 49-7. So what now? You know what I'm saying? So it's like Alabama, they'll probably end up beating those opponents. So I'm not too concerned about their schedule. When you've won a lot of national championships too, sometimes you can get a little easier schedule. I'm just going to throw that out there. Real quick, was running a little bit low on time. National championship pick before we go to the Heisman Trophy. We've talked about a lot of teams here. Mentioned a lot of the top 10. I'll say my national champion. I think it's going to be Clemson. I think Clemson.
You're stealing my thunder.
Oh man. But so they have Bryant coming back at quarterback. I just think every single year they're going to be in it. They're kind of turning into one of those teams like Alabama that's in, and teams like Ohio State, they're in it every single year. I'm going to go Clemson. I think they get back into the national championship ranks after they won it with Deshaun Watson a couple of years ago. And I think the Clemson Tigers are going to go undefeated the whole year, not lose a game, and they're going to go and win the national championship. Unfortunate because it is the same team we've kind of been seeing. We've seen them in the national championship if this happens again 3 out of the last 4 years. But, you know, we watch Golden State Warriors there every single year too. So.
Man, you're stealing my thunder over here. I'm picking Clemson as well.
So I had to go first.
It's not actually because of their offense. It's because of their defense.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry that I can't name off the top of my head all 4 of their defensive line starters. But
they're beasts.
This is not even just by me. This is from Kirk Herbstreit and a lot of other veteran college football analysts and reporters that say this Clemson defensive line, all 4 of them are going to get drafted in the NFL next year, and they could all get drafted in the first or second round, which means these are all NFL players on the defensive line, and they're
not
all
going to be fun.
They're all coming back, returning from last year, which means they all have veteran experience. And I think this defense is going to lead this team to a championship. I've always said the defense wins championships, and I think that is no more true than with this team right here. Obviously, offensively, they can put up points, and they have a lot of weapons. But when you can keep your opponents from scoring, the offense doesn't have to score 30, 40 points a game, even though they can. So I think this defense will actually be better than Alabama. I think Alabama is going through a little bit of a transition period, even though they still have 4 and 5 star talent. I don't think they have the veteran experience. I think they're very, very young on defense. And so I'm actually going to give the defensive edge to Clemson as far as the rankings go. And that's my reason why I think Clemson will get to and win the national championship.
Yeah, that defense is going to be very fun to watch and very scary to play if you're playing against it.
Right.
All right, we got 3 minutes left. Heisman Trophy winner. Who do you think gets it? And then maybe give like an outlier who you think people aren't thinking of either.
I'm going Stanford's Bryce Love. I think, like we've already talked about him a lot today, I think he's a bell cow. I think he's going to be the top running back coming out of college football next year into the NFL draft. And I think just he's in a perfect system. Stanford loves to run the ball. They're going to feature him a lot. They utilize him. And I think the best thing about him is his toughness. We know how good of a runner he is, his vision, all that stuff. He was literally playing on a bum ankle last year, and he still ended up playing in the bowl game when in today's college football, a lot of athletes, even if they're 100% healthy, will sit out bowl games because they don't want to injure themselves. To whereas Bryce Love was like, screw it, I'm still going out there and I'm playing for my team. I think that shows a lot of character for him. So I think Bryce Love in my opinion, is the kind of front runner there. I'm actually going to give Trace McSorley of Penn State a nod in this race, this Heisman race as well. Like I said, he loses Saquon Barkley, the best running back last year, but I think this year that just gives him more of an opportunity to showcase what he can do as a quarterback and not necessarily rely so much on his other running mates. So Trace McSorley is kind of my dark horse, and I'm going with Bryce Love as my feature.
I think Bryce Love is a very easy pick, and I think he will do well. But I think I have another guy in mind that I think is going to end up winning it because the talent on his team isn't as good as it was last year. And I think he'll still play, and I think he's a very good quarterback. It's Jake Browning from Washington. The quarterback, he started when he was a freshman. He's played really good. That's why Washington's been in the championship mix the last couple of years. I think he finally takes that extra step forward. So I will say he's going to win it, but it's going to be really close between him and Bryce Love. Obviously, you have Tua as well up there as well. Bryant from Clemson could also win it. And probably we'll see an outlier or two come out of there as well. So I'm going to go with Jake Browning just to pick something different because we already picked Clemson both to win the national championship. So I'll go Jake Browning, Bryce Love right up there as well. Any final thoughts? We have about a minute left.
Yeah, quickly, UCLA, Chip Kelly.
Yeah,
are they contenders this year?
It's almost impossible to say. I don't think they have the talent on that team right now, and they haven't even picked the quarterback yet. So I think it's hard to say any team that hasn't picked the quarterback yet is going to be a contender. I think they'll be interesting, and I think they'll beat some teams and they'll surprise some teams. You might see them beat like Stanford or something like at the end of the season, right, like that. But it's a new era at UCLA, something completely different from what they had with Jim Morris. So interested to see as a UCLA fan. It'd be fun to watch. My final thought. Shout out to a guy that was trying out for the Minnesota Vikings as a fullback, Johnny Stanton. If you know that name, he played another guy that played Santa Margarita, won the state championship, was the player of the year in high school and here in California back in 2012, I believe. Broke his leg, had to do the air casket, carted out the field. But he kind of joked about it on Twitter after and took it very nicely, and a lot of NFL guys were kind of giving him credit for doing that. Also played here at Saddleback where we record. Took them to the national championship for community college. Ended up losing that game. So shout out to Johnny Stanton, the guy I've kind of followed most of my high school and college life. And broke his leg. Probably won't make the team, obviously, since he won't be able to play. But shout out to him for being courageous and being kind of joking about it on Twitter. He was joking about how he wanted people to stop sending him videos of him breaking his leg on the play. So there's that. And so shout out to Johnny Stanton for being a good sport about his injury.
My final thought, really quick, is school's back.
Yes.
School starts again. We showed up today, and unlike the last 2 months where the parking lot was empty, the parking lot was completely full, and we had to park all the way out in Neverland, basically. But no, school starts back, so good luck to all of you students. I believe this is the first full week that school is going on, if I'm not mistaken. Nick, I believe actually you have a class coming up here pretty soon, so we're going to wrap this up and get Nick to his studies.
Yeah, absolutely. You hear the music right there. That means it's the end of the podcast. Hey, next week, like we mentioned, NFL Predictions Podcast. We're going to be going the whole entire podcast, minus maybe 10-15 minutes for Do You Care, on the NFL. We're going to be predicting every division. We're going to be predicting the Super Bowl, maybe predict the playoffs, predicting MVPs, stuff like that. So you do not want to miss one of our best podcasts of the year next week. I'm Nick Nenad.
I'm Jared Smith.
And this has been the Cover 2 Podcast on OC Rock Radio.